throughout we can find a way to see the participants would be really nice. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the HGMV, the Holocaust, Genocide, Mass Violence workshop that we coordinate between the Center for Holocaust Genocide Studies and the Human Rights Program. And it's great to have so many of you joining this workshop on remote fieldwork during a pandemic. And I want to thank our guest, Francisco Ferrándiz, who is a senior researcher at the CSIC, the Spanish Research Council, and also the lead researcher and coordinator of the Politics of Memory network and research project. He is familiar to many of us here at the University of Minnesota. He came twice in presence, right? We had him physically here, not only virtually, which was also the case a few months ago. He presented on Necropolitics, Mass Graves and Exhumations in the Age of Human Rights. That's a book, a volume he co-edited with Tony Robin. And he also was here in 2014 when he presented on his work on exhumations, memory, and the return of Civil War ghosts in Spain, which is an ethnography that he will also briefly tell us about in this workshop. Both presentations, for those of you who are interested in Paco's work, are on our YouTube channel. We can share it, the link on the chat. And I also want to mention this latest book because Paco has also published articles and also this recent volume is coming out very soon. Contemporary Ethnographies, Moorings, Methods and Keys for the Future. And given his expertise on methods broadly, but also in virtual fieldwork, we thought it would be a great idea to have him join our workshop today. So we're really grateful, Paco, to have you. Thank you for being here. And so we have thought of organizing this in the following way: a brief, maybe 15-20 minutes presentation. Then George Dalbo, who you can also see there, raising his hand, will maybe summarize the main, or at least point to the main takeaways and post some questions, and then we will open it up to everyone to share their experiences and challenges doing this type of fieldwork from a computer and during this time. So thank you again, and I will turn it over to Paco Ferrándiz.
So thanks, George and Alex, for having me. At this point, I am totally confined for a month in my home in Madrid. The usual Madrid has been the center of the storm, of the coronavirus storm. So I have to apologize because I didn't have, we almost had to escape from our jobs overnight, and I don't have books or at home. I mean, it's kind of a very funny situation we have here now. So I was just I was just reviewing some of my notes and whatnot, and I thought that what we could do, and I was discussing it with George and Alex, is that just give you like a brief set of ideas about what can be done, like in a situation like the one we are living now. Mention some possible methodological options. Talk to you a little bit about what I've done in my fieldwork, in the cyber ethnographic part of my fieldwork in Spain, and then have like a brainstorming, because I believe that a lot of you are in difficult situations regarding your research, in terms of some of you probably were in the field and have to come back. Some of you have funding and cannot make it to the place. Some of you, and on top of that, we don't know what the confinement, how much the confinement will last, how much mobility will we have in the next few months, and what is the meaning of the new social distancing. I mean, these are all like concepts that are crucial for ethnographic research. So what we have to do is like try to reinvent ourselves with the methods we have and try to see how much we can do in the circumstances in which we find ourselves now. Basically, in terms of your research projects, I was thinking that obviously each of you is in a different situation, no? But basically, I was thinking that there are like a number of options that come to my mind, depending on how far away you are into your field work. You could have like a radical reformulation of your project. This is, I mean, we can see this coronavirus thing also as an opportunity to move into something else or close to what you were doing. Another form is another possibility is like the post or to hibernate your project and move to parts of your project that are not that do not involve fieldwork, or that means to rearrange your design in terms of research. Other interest. I mean, I'm just showing you some images of this piece we have in Madrid. And this is a photographer, Clemente Bernal, a friend of mine. He just done an exhibition now in the Reina Sofía in Madrid. He was just in the streets taking this kind of images. This is what we find now in the streets of many places throughout the world. So another option is to do like ad hoc, rapid response fieldwork. Depending also if you are doing a master's, a PhD, it also varies. But for example, this is this is the book that Alex was talking about. This is just an example of what can be done. But this is obviously referring to coronavirus, and this is like an instant book that was published by a friend of mine and also a friend of Alex Baer on the pandemic, and it came out of a Twitter conversation. Here you have the Twitter conversation in Spanish, no? It was about what happened to teenagers, no, during the confinement. And my friend Carles, he's here. He had 2 teenagers at home, and he decided to do this book like it's confined adolescents. Made this instant book, just talking to them and having a diary, uploading it and whatnot. So this is like some of the options that I see that can be done. This is part of the. I mean, this is also the book that they published. It's just an ebook, and they have also some material online. Basically, what I think we have to do now, all of us in our research, is what I would call to come up with rapid response methodological tools and ideas, just to go through to try to cross and to survive the pandemic in research-wise. No, so basically, I just wanted to show you some of the antecedents that can help us, come up with some ideas. Basically, I think that a lot of you work with issues of violence. George, is this something I can count on? I mean, like most of the people who is in the seminar has worked with violence and stuff.
In some way, shape, or form, absolutely, yes. Yeah,
absolutely, no. So I just wanted to point you to these 2 books because they Fieldwork and the Fire is a book that's very, very interesting. It's a very old book. It's 1995 by Tony Robin and Caroline Nordstrom. I have done most of my research also on violence. And I think that when you have to work on in places where there are different kinds of violence, you have to basically force or reinvent ethnography as opposed to other more benign kind of field sites. No, so I just want to tell you a little bit about the problems that you can find in your fieldwork when you are doing things in terms of violence. I mean, when there are like situations of violence. So I just wanted to point to you to this book so you can check it in the library and kind of read through it, because it basically talks about issues of security and risk, distrust, the construction of empathy with in these very difficult situations, ambiguity, the ethics of research, the anticipated consequences that the research can have on informants, and blah blah blah. So all these things, the limits of empathy, the gray zones, the spaces of death, and all these metaphors that we should talk about this situation. No? But the very this is, you know, kind of the general things that when you go to do fieldwork in a situation of violence, you have to kind of it's kind of midway between normal fieldwork and coronavirus, so to speak. So Robin published this book a few years ago called Iraq at a Distance, and it was an experiment on distance ethnography. And basically what he was trying to do is like, basically the question he was asking is like, are we anthropologists, sociologists, or researchers who work with some kind of ethnographic methods? Are we kind of mute when a war situation takes place? What do we do, for example, during the Iraqi war? Can we activate parts of our experience, what he calls the ethnographic imagination, the comparative method, to talk about a conflict where it's impossible to have fieldwork on the ground? No, so this is basically in 3 lines, in 2 very basic ideas, what they are trying to do with this book, which actually has a wonderful cover. As you can see, the helicopter, the shadow helicopter, and the Marines just taking the sun here in Iraq, you know, from above. So this is basically what he was proposing. Like, we do have the methodological tools, and we also have the experience and the readings and the comparative method, so we can actually talk about situations where we don't have access to this. I leave this question open because a lot of ethnographers wouldn't agree with this. Then I wanted to show you this because there was an interesting paper that came out in American Anthropologist on what the author called participant webservation. And it was basically his reaction to the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers in New York. And basically what he did was he followed, I mean, he couldn't be there obviously, but what he was doing was following in the internet, online, on the different kind of media, all the events, and then, you know, deciphering them with an analytical mind, try to come up with analysis, no? Which is difficult to come up with analysis, rapid response analysis, when you have situations as complex as this one, no? So this could be something that could be done also with coronavirus, no? This is like we can do ethnographies of coronavirus, but we cannot go out in the streets, but we can come up with for example, if you are a medical anthropology, or if you have worked with issues of epidemiology, you have the resources, you have the knowledge, you have the concepts, no, to analyze what's coming up in the media, and you can, you know, have an expert opinion, so to speak, no? So basically, this is what I wanted to say about the participant observation and the anthropology of at a distance. But basically, I think that what it's most interesting in a situation like the one we have now is the possibility that we have through internet of accessing at least parts of our research scenarios. Obviously, this also depends on whether you're working, if the people you are working with have internet, what kind of internet access, and whatnot. So basically, I will tell you words about what digital ethnography means. As you can see here with these 2 books that I am also recommending you, one of them others, and the other one is a companion of Routledge Companion on Digital Ethnography. There is a specific part of ethnographic method which deals with online, different types of fieldwork online. And this is something discussed later with each of your projects, and it's basically how can we activate these methods to push forward our projects a little bit, or at least stay in touch with the people we are working with, or do actual work that could substitute. Excuse me, they're calling me. There's that could substitute on-site fieldwork. No, so I'm going to tell you like a few ideas about digital ethnography. Basically, digital ethnography means a sharp redefinition of the field and the unities of analysis. No, it's obvious that some of the things that I'm going to be saying are kind of obvious. No, but I'm just making them. I am making them, visible, so we can think about them later. No. We have to be clear also that there are a multiplicity of approaches to fieldwork online or digital ethnography. There is no single method. No? Also, that digital media have to be require an extra element of reflexivity, in the sense that we have to think what is the kind of access that our informants or epistemic partners have to the internet, because this would totally mediate the kind of communication we may have with them. And there are a lot of things in terms of power relations, and depending on the part of the world, who can access who is in, who is out, and which are the networks. And whatnot. Openness, to have an open mind, we have to invent, to make, the internet also allows for a lot of creativity in terms of coming up with ethnographic methods that serve our purposes. Also, here we have to think that digital ethnography means that it's multi-site, that is multi-platform, and it's also multi-level. Devices that are communication are at the same time field sites, communication devices, and data recording instruments. No? So we have to rethink also our smartphones, our computers, our tablets, iPads as part of our life. No? The reason some of them, this type of ethnographies, is in ethnographies. No. Obviously, the fieldwork experience has to be assessed to go on the digital mode, but we can talk about this later. Usually, when we use a digital ethnography, not always, but usually, we kind of simultaneously on-site ethnography. So part of the ethnography is kind of to see how the people come and go from one side to the other, from the field to the digital sphere. No? And then we acquire new ethical let me see. In terms of the tools that we can use, okay. Can you follow me? Yes? Okay. For example, in terms of the tools that we normal ethnography and can be refashioned or to adjust temporary digital ethnography, is like what online participation means, what co-presence in the field means. It's totally different from face-to-face types of ethnography, no? Because, for example, you can participate as an experiencer. You can just go in the group you are studying, or talk to the people and just reveal that you are an ethnographer, or you are a sociologist, or you are doing research. But you can also be like this, like just work from behind many masks and whatnot. Both methods can be activated depending on the situations, but all of them have different ethical considerations. No? We have also to rethink what an informant or an epistemic partner is. So it's not obviously not the same as in the face-to-face communication. We have to rethink the role of the gatekeepers. No? The gatekeeper could be the person who allows you to participate in a group, in an online group of any type. No? We have to learn how to do rapport, like a virtual rapport, how to build virtual rapport. This is very, very complicated because, you know, when we are face-to-face with people, we have many, many different clues to communicate with them, and here we are limited to a screen, but also we have a lot of resources that are available to us. No? So normal fieldwork that can be or modulated or modified to be done and during this time. For example, interviews, or it's very easy to do, as easy as to create a students. We can unlock, of course, can be done online, you know, very well. We can obviously view download photographs and videos and organize our files. We can take online field notes or blogs. We can make compilations on photo albums. I mean, there are many, many different elements from face-to-face fieldwork that can be also used in a modified manner in a digital ethnography. And basically, one thing that I would advise you before just moving on is like that we have to understand that the platforms that we use to access people in digital ethnography are very different and have their own algorithms, and we have to adapt to them. So again, I have to insist on the reflexivity. That's very important. No, if we do like a Facebook ethnography or WhatsApp ethnography or Twitter ethnography, each of them these platforms have different characteristics that we have no condition in the way in which the social relationships take place. Important that we remain reflexive of how the new conditions in which the connection, the communication takes place. No, so I've done basically all of this during my fieldwork, and I will tell you a little bit about this later. But I don't want to extend myself too long. So I wanted to say that there is another trend in so basically the point up to here is that you can use digital ethnography to do parts of your fieldwork, but it will depend on the characteristics of the fieldwork, obviously. But also there are like some people that are using digital ethnography to analyze the new kinds of social relationships that are created in virtual ecologies. And I think this is also a very, very important part of it. No? New ethnographic locations, new forms of sociability, the growing digitalization of our everyday lives, etc., etc. No? Okay, so I think we can talk way more about all of this later. I will show you some more images that I had here. As you can see, there are like, if you want to go deeper, to delve deeper into these techniques, these methods, this is the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology has this digital ethnography research center, which is very interesting. You can check there a lot of, I mean, they do these seminars, or also the WOC here in Spain, the Universidad Oberta de Catalunya, also works with this kind of methods all the time. And okay, I don't know if we have a little bit more of time to show you some images about my fieldwork, Alex, or are we just, I already talked too much?
No, this is fine. I think we have a little bit more of time. I want to make sure that also maybe this is a good moment if there is a question or follow-up from the group. And I'm not 100% certain that the chat is functioning. So maybe it's an opportunity to test that. Is there any question or follow-up? No, Paco, would that be okay?
Yeah.
And then,
no, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, it's working. Great. Chat is working. Good. So yeah, what other things? So maybe, yeah, Paco, that would be interesting to learn a little bit about your remote fieldwork.
Yeah, well, as I said, this is obviously the same situation we have now, because I was using this is one image of my fieldwork in Spanish mass grave exhumations from the Civil War. Alex just mentioned that I have been doing this fieldwork now for 20 years. So the thing is that when we started doing this fieldwork in the year 2000, there was no smartphones, or the digital ecologies were underdeveloped. No, we even took slides, and the pictures, classic pictures. No, but then it totally changed, and Alex and I wrote an early paper on what we call the digital memory, that basically was like the use of these devices to produce. This is obviously a very complex memory process, and so we use this. We try to understand how the arrival of these smartphones and the arrival of Facebook and later Twitter and all these platforms was transforming the way in which we thought and recycled the past. No, so basically we had no choice but to do like a dual kind of ethnography. On the one hand, we did like on-site ethnography, classic ethnography, although the environment of mass graves is not what you may call a classic ethnography in itself. Is very complex, and you can imagine this is very complex social environments. And we also did the multi-site ethnography, not just mass graves, but also reburials, every kind of ceremony, ethnography in the laboratories and whatnot. But at the same time, we realized that a good part of the memory work that was taking place, that was triggered by this exhumation, it was happening online. So that meant that we had to simultaneously work on both realities, so to speak, virtual reality and oxygen reality, so to speak. And then I will show you some images of this fieldwork. We were just moving around Spain, also trying to understand like the nationalist overtones of this recovery of historical memory in different parts of Spain. This is the Basque Country. And this is what I was telling you. Like at some point, you see this is a relative of somebody who was executed during the Spanish Civil War, and this is a mass grave that's going to be open, and there are here a couple of bones, and this is the moment where these very old cameras started to show up in the exhumations, and all these images were then uploaded in different platforms. The use of mobile phones also meant that this memory could be in real time in this platform. This person, for example, would take this picture, would actually the mediations of the technology were just amazing. In this case, he just took a picture of this body, which was an image of an exhibition in a reburial ceremony in a place in Toledo, close to Madrid. And so he said, "This is my grandfather." So we call this digital kinship, because he basically took the picture and connected this skeleton to his family with no other reason but intuition, digital intuition, so to speak. No, so also we had a lot of media going into the exhumations, and everything. I'm just shooting with these digital cameras, and everything started to go online. And so it even became more important what was happening online, the debates online, the controversies online, the kind of the limits of representation of these bodies, the way in which they were displayed online and whatnot. So we started to look into these web pages and try to see what kind of materials, how they organize their materials. So this was basically part of the ethnography we pursue. I mean, the digital ethnography we did. No, here, you know, again, photographies from the mass graves, analyzing. We could analyze what was the logic of it, what was the aesthetic of it, what was the purpose of it, what was the debates, what were the debates that came out of these images, and whatnot. So we also would go into like neo-Nazi groups just to get this kind of images. This is the Valley of the Fallen. Maybe you've heard about it. And so I also go into these web pages and try to get these images. Like at this point in time, they thought they were being censored, and so this is like they have defaced themselves to avoid being arrested by the police and whatnot. So these are more and more images that we were recording. Also, institutionally, a lot of the memory went online. These are like the maps showing the mass graves, and so a lot of people starting to experience this memory process more online than on site. So we were following it and trying to make sense of it. And this is like, for example, Facebook, no? The images, I was just in an exhumation, and I could, with my mobile phone, I just saw that some of the people who were with me was taking pictures and uploading them in Facebook in real time. No? So I was following also this process of digitalization of memory, no? And this is related also to this process that has been a lot in the media, a lot of in the TVs, and so this is just examples of how we can also follow these processes in the media, and we also have techniques, no, to make sense of this and analyze why a certain person is coming out in a certain program at some time, and all of these things. No, this is also in terms of this is myself and Francisco Franco and his wife in the Valley of the Fallen, and this is basically also something we have to do, which is like go online and do like interviews from our homes or from our offices. And here in Twitter, the controversies are around these testimonies that we would give online and whatnot. And I just wanted, so there are many issues here that we can elaborate on them later. But basically, I just wanted to show you why there are certain points in time where ethnography can only be online. And this is the case of the exhumation of the Spain's dictator, Francisco Franco, that took place on October 24th last year. And it's the result of a very, very long process. But basically, the exhumation took place in this huge monument called the Valley of the Fallen, in 40 kilometers away from Madrid. And it only had a unique signal that was basically broadcast by the Spanish state. So there was no way we could have any access at all to this. So we were just following it through the media and the social media and the comments that were taking place in social media and the memes that were the people was doing as it happened and whatnot. This is the choreography of the exhumation of the dictator, and also this powerful image, the family leaving the Valley of the Fallen totally alone, not like abandoned by democracy. But these are like some of the images, and the state, you know, these are like the representatives of the state that were present there. And also this very powerful image of the helicopter lifting the body of the dictator from the monument and leaving and bringing it to another burial place. So very briefly, I know I have tiptoed over a lot of stuff, but I just wanted to give you like a general, very very simple general overview, so we could go into more concrete details regarding your needs, no? In terms of where do you stay now, if you are stuck, if we can help you out of the situation, or what kind of solution we can implement, you know, to do fieldwork in the next month, 2 years, I don't know. Alex, that's I'm done for now.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paco. I will turn it over to George. There are also some questions in the chat and in the Q&A feature of the Zoom. So.
Yes. Yeah, and I'll try to summarize a little bit, and then I'll try to bring up those questions, at least the ones that I've seen. So I apologize if there are new questions that I haven't seen from people, but hopefully we'll have a chance for a robust discussion. I'll just say, for those of you that don't know me, my name is George Dalbo, and I'm a PhD student in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction in the College of Education at the University of Minnesota. And I specifically study, Holocaust, genocide, human rights education in K-12 classrooms. And so I can just say from my own experience, I am in the middle of, I was in the middle of doing several ethnographic case studies in public schools here in the United States. And so while I haven't faced some of the issues that some of you have faced, in terms of, being forced to leave sites and issues around funding and things, certainly the move to, online teaching has greatly disrupted, the work that I imagined. And, I think, this fantastic talk that touched on so much. And I think of, where you began, Paco, this idea of, maybe 3 ways to rethink research, this, radical reformation, maybe the idea of hibernating the project, until things return to some state that allows you to do the research, or, this idea of embracing new forms of research. And I think of them, in terms of my own research and development over the last few weeks, is almost like the stages of grief, that immediately when this happened, I thought, well, I'll, throw everything out and radically reform what I was thinking. And then after a few days of, jotting, furiously notes, I realized, well, that's not going to work. And, maybe I just need to pause and put everything on hold. And, hopefully in a few months, I can get back to this work. And then, I've settled, I think, somewhere, in between, embracing, kind of, ways to think about this research in new ways. And, but definitely appreciate your comments about the abruptness of this all, and, your lack of books at your home, and I think I'm realizing the same thing without access to physical library materials and even printing at the university, which I relied on. And so I think you develop a number of questions for us, about using our expertise to continue working, even if we can't quite be in the field in the same way. And, questions around, how can we use, this idea of an ethnographic imagination. But I think also, the question of, can we talk about places that we don't have access to, is sitting with me and thinking about doing work within classrooms, and, how some have moved online and some haven't at this point, and questions around access. And, I think as you got into the digital ethnography piece, certainly, the importance of reflexivity struck home with me, and thinking about schools that have gone online, and, teachers that are comfortable with having me work with students in their new virtual classrooms, but then thinking about the schools that haven't been able to go online, and students that don't have access, to technology, and, how that would shape my research outcomes. But I think certainly your point about allowing for new creativity is very hopeful. And I found that as well, that even as I've had to shift my research focus, what had been a very localized project, now I'm realizing I'm having the opportunity to talk to teachers around the country, because I've rethought how I'm going to be doing interviews and, accessing classrooms. But then I think these comments about new locations, that exist virtually, and how we should be thinking about these, and certainly the interplay between the virtual world that existed, before this, and, is perhaps heightened, and the physical world that people still, exist within. And so, yeah, just thank you again for the fantastic presentation. It's brought up a number of questions for me. And then people that are here joining us have asked questions about how to navigate language in, virtual work, especially if it's language, languages that you're not fluent in. And then someone else asked a question about gaining access to virtual communities, and which can be certainly more difficult. And so gaining access to, closed Facebook communities and things like that. So maybe I'll leave my comments there and turn it back over to you, Professor, or to the group for questions and discussion.
Can they speak, or do we have to do it through the questions they send you to the chat? Or I think
they can. There are a number of questions. One is from an anonymous attendee, but there's Catherine Gisan and Barbara Fry. Maybe you want to.
Yeah. So this means that we can hear them actually if they speak.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. And I just wanted to know. So if you want, I can answer briefly some ideas about these two questions: how to navigate languages. Well, this is the languages. Yeah, it's a huge problem, but it's the same in physical fieldwork. I mean, it's like you have to learn. The good thing about digital is that it's not so much languages that images that that's going to be part. I mean, there is like a universalization, so to speak, of different visual or like global landscapes of images moving come and forth, which kind of help you relate to people who don't speak your same language. So I don't know if this, in a sense, to mobilize this, to mobilize through images more than through how do you, Alex? How do you call memes in English? How do you say that? Memes. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of the reality is interpreted through memes now, and this kind of new online humor, no, that we all have, no. So and this travels across languages, no, and to a sense, because humor is also very, very culturally bound, so to speak, no. But there are different. I mean, while you learn the language, it's not just speaking, it's also communicating in the different resources that the new media allow you to. So I think that it could be even easier to connect to certain communities online than to do it on real life. I don't know if I'm overstretching myself here, but I would think that, as I said, I think we have to reinvent ourselves to the screen fieldwork, not to this screen ethnography, and it cuts out, it cuts us out from direct contact, but it gives us a lot of resources. I mean, you can be using like this translate and Google translators, no, just to communicate with people, which is something you cannot do openly, you know, in physical fieldwork. But here you can just just type and say, I want it in Pakistan, and then it could come out, probably with errors and but it allows you to a different kind of communication. So if we have to kind of reimagine the ways in which we can communicate with all the new means that come to us through the digital media. So this is part of my answer to, in terms of reimagining all the time our engagement with the field, no, and how to gain access to digital communities. That's difficult. But first, if we have to detect that they exist, and they try to see how we can connect with one of the members and then gain access to them. But in this sense, I do not feel it is very different to going to a closed community in the rainforest, for example, and gaining access to that community. I mean, it's you have to go through gatekeepers. You have to take your time. It's not something that happens immediately. You have to learn to explain yourself. This is something that I mentioned very, very briefly before, and it's related to the importance of making yourself known as a researcher, or being in the shadows behind many masks, so to speak, no? Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a very important ethical issue.
There are some great questions on the Q&A and also on the chat, and I would like to invite them to post them directly, so we can hear you. But also, Paco, I wanted to suggest, if you wouldn't mind, switching back to you to another image. We have this huge, nothing against the cross, but you know, the Valley of the Fallen there. You know, maybe you want to stop sharing, and so we can see you on the screen, or just have.
I don't know how to get out of this.
I think you have to just.
Oh, okay. Stop sharing.
Yes.
Perfect.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, shall we open it up to? It would be great to hear the participants directly.
Alejandro.
Yes, Catherine.
Okay. I had one question about, you know, we have to go through various processes to obtain authorization to interview, especially subject at risk.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether those protocols, and I realize they'll be different, maybe in different institutions, are going to have to be revised. And then I would like just to briefly share where I am, because I am doing research overseas always. I'm a political scientist, but I use anthropological methods as well. So I have two projects, one in Cyprus, one in Ukraine, already drafted. In Cyprus, I feel comfortable going on by internet because I have been there. I know the people. So a relationship of trust has been established, you know, and I can talk with people and they can bring me to others. In Ukraine, even though I had Ukrainian counterpart and I was going this spring and I had finance and I still have some, it's different. I haven't been there. So I don't feel I can finish a project just from here, but I'm thinking I need to put a bit of money into the person who is going to help me with translation and contact. And so I may hire her anyway with some of the money I have here to keep her going, so to speak, and to do a few preliminary interviews. So it's to research overseas, but I feel in very different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a fantastic example of the difficulties we are facing now, because and you have two very different situations. Like as I said at the beginning, each of you would be like a different at a different stage in your research. No, obviously the Cyprus case is I'm not going to be that is easy, but you can sort it out because you have the connection, you have the trust is already there. Probably you can connect with them. I mean, the project is going to change no matter what. I mean, we are talking about huge adjustments, and you cannot probably ask the same questions, or we will all be forced to refashion our projects no matter what, because we don't know how this is going to, how long this is going to take. And then also, even if we are allowed to travel, this thing about the social distancing, I don't know how long it's going to take, and this will transform also the way in which we relate to one another. And culturally, for example, in Spain, we are very accustomed to being together, you know, very together. And this is going to, it's very weird. I went to the supermarket the other day with a mask, and I was asphyxiated. I had to leave because I couldn't leave that situation. I mean, it was not, I feel incredibly uncomfortable. So I think that it's important in terms of that we have to think that we will have to readjust even the most, the most advanced projects. In the case of Ukraine, yes, obviously it depends on what you want to study, but I don't know what to say. I mean, I think that it's obvious that the preliminary interviews, you mean that it would be, Catherine, the person that you are going to hire is the person who is going to be doing these few preliminary interviews?
My idea, and I don't have time just now to set it up, I will in a month, is to hire her to set up a few preliminary interviews. I have already a project drafted. I have some questions, and talk with her. If she tells me no, she tells me no, you know.
Yeah. But this
we are
is
connected and we are going to work together. And so I'm thinking not only of my research, but also her, because, you know, people also, if we had told them we're going to use them, we had some money to hire them,
Yeah.
you know, it's how do we keep people also employed if we can?
Yeah.
So it's partly
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And also, you had another question about protocols.
Protecting subjects, yes. How do we go about that?
That will have to change. I mean, that's obvious, as many other things in our lives. And I don't think it change, or at least incorporate, like the new scenarios we have to face. And this is a very serious problem in terms of how you deal with your own universities and departments, no? Because you will have to make sure that the way in which you refashion your projects is going to be approved by these committees, and also by the funding.
Go ahead,
Hasha.
Thank you.
Hi, can I, my question is a little bit of a follow-up to the previous question. I was doing interviews with study participants not too far from here in St. Cloud, but because I could go there and meet with them, it was easier to convince them to do the interviews and build trust. But now we're trying to do them over the phone, and so I'm wondering if any of the panelists or attendees have experience doing such a switch, and like experiences to share, or like what could I possibly do to build trust?
Well, obviously over the phone, but you mean by video?
No, telephone.
Telephone. Okay.
Yeah, we're calling them.
Okay. Well,
like actually, if I should probably back off another step. We also need to ask them for their phone numbers to call them.
Yeah.
And so like that's where it's getting harder and to build trust.
Yeah. The thing is that now in this new situation, the what you may call the negotiations to access, the ways in which we access the field, it always takes a long negotiation. It's not, and then the situation has changed, and everybody understands the new situation because everybody's living it one way or another, no? And everybody's adjusting. So we are in a period in which everybody is, I think, I mean, you may be unlucky, but I would think that the people you have started working with, or the people you want to interview on the phone, will be receptive to changing the method of the communication, because the situation is clear for everybody. I mean, it's impossible for you to travel to these places and whatnot, and I think there will be so it's just renegotiating the communication you will have with them. But at the same time, I mentioned, and George also found it interesting, that this idea about reflexivity. We have to think that a change in the method or a change in the protocol means that the material we are going to get is different from the material we expected to have. Meaning that we have always to think which are like the conditions in which these interviews took place when we are ready to interpret them. So this is something that I would, it's very important for ethnography always to have a reflexive stance, to be always thinking about, I am doing well, I'm doing wrong, this material I thought it would have this, it would have this quality and it has the other, I forgot to switch on the recorder, I have to go back, all these problems that we have on fieldwork. And so I think that it's important that we are reflexive now. But at this point, I forgot to say this before, I wanted to say it before you started, is that if you have funding, or if you have to go through these human protection protocols, you should check on them, on the committees, before you move on. I don't know, because at least I would do it, just to prevent problems problems that may come along, in the future. But I also think, as I said before, that everybody is in the same situation, and there is a lot of understanding.
Okay.
Can I ask like a follow-up question on that actually too? So, hi, my name is Valentina Salas. I'm a PhD candidate in political science. Thank you so much, Francisco, for your presentation. So I have two questions related with reflexivity in terms of like doing fieldwork remotely or like virtual fieldwork. So I was in the field amid this outbreak of COVID-19, and I had to come back to Minnesota when I was conducting some interviews. So now I'm trying to think of how you can conduct interviews virtually, right? How that changes what the field means. And I've been trying to think about that because you define your field in a certain way before you go to the field, right? And that changes when you're there. But now when you move to conducting these interviews, that also changes the setting, right? And at the end, what the field in particular means, and how that changes also not only the interview, but also your research in general. And I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
Well, my only thought is that we have to be very creative, and we have no. I mean, I don't think there is another recipe to this. It's obvious that when it's not the same. Where were you, Valentina?
I was in Chile.
In Chile, okay. It's obviously not the same being face to face, and you know, because the whole, particularly I mean, we know Latino societies, no, like the sociability is very important, and for example, when you have to do an interview, the bodily clues are very important. The preliminaries, you know, the how you break the ice, and you know, you may be talking to them, you know, for a 10-15 minutes before the interview starts, and then afterward you would go out for a drink, and all this sociability is gone. So you have to try to reconstruct it prosthetically, if we say, I mean, in a sense. But at the same time, you have to think that we are all, in a sense, digital citizens. So all of us spend more and more time online. And so it's just a matter of readjusting, but also, as I briefly mentioned before, the quality of the material will never be the same. It's not better or worse, it's going to be different. And as it is different, you have to take that into account when you analyze it. And but basically, if the question is that if it changes everything. And but I think that we can prosthetically kind of get as far as we can in the sense of staying close to our initial project. But for that, we have to be imaginative, and we may have to do, I don't know, maybe you can do with them, if you have enough, I mean, I'm just making it up, if you have enough trust built with them, you can just have one of these Zoom drinks, no? Like we are here on the weekends, for example, in Spain, we are doing Zoom drinks with friends all the time, no? And so we just get together with a beer and and talk for 4 hours. And this is part of the sociability that you would have if you were on the ground. You can try to reproduce it, you know, for your own fieldwork. Just get together with them. Just think that not of doing just individual interviews, but collective interviews. And after the interview, well, let's have a break, and then you have and take out the beer. And so all this informality that comes along with the interviewing process, in a sense, is rescued through the means we have at hand at this point. I don't know if this helps or not.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, this is Barb Fry.
Hi, Barb.
Hi. Thank you, Paco, for joining us today. This has been
wonderful to hear your voice.
So I was just going to add, I mean, my biggest concern is that the bubbles that we already live in are exaggerated during this time, and that especially we have to be concerned about the silences and the the people who are not visible. So I know a lot of people's work, like I know Valentina's work, and a lot of the students on this call are working with communities that don't have the same access to technology, or they're not in the same social circles who are able to protect themselves against, you know, what's going on. So I've been trying to think about this a little bit. I mean, we really do have to be quite assertive about thinking about ways to reach those communities and not just let them be invisible. And I think the telephone is probably an underrated form of communication. It allows us, I think just about everybody in the world has access to a telephone. We have to, of course, exercise all the reflexivity that you've been talking about. But I just think a combination of really thinking about, and maybe we could consult psychologists and, you know, other experts about human nature, but I think you can do some small talk. I think we have to really adjust the way we approach these interviews and ask first a lot about how are you doing, how is your family, you know, what's your experience been like, that kind of thing that is not part of the interview. And in order to gain that trust, because you think about the ways that you gain trust. Now, what's a little tricky here is we need to go to IRB and have them be thinking through some of these questions with us, because, you know, I'm working with the families of the disappeared. I'm not working with them directly, but say I'm trying to talk or interview with families of the disappeared. I'm not going to automatically launch into the discussion. That's not how you do it in person, right? You talk to them about, you know, how are things in your community and that kind of thing. And I just think we have to replicate human interaction as much as possible. And I think the phone is a decent vehicle because it portrays the human voice. And I think we should be consulting with experts on ways to build trust through voice alone.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. I think it's totally in tune with what I was trying to say in a number of ways. First of all, I mean, when I have a whole section in my book on how to conduct interviews and how to build trust, and it's not an easy task at all, and it depends on the situation, particularly if you are talking to relatives of the disappeared, or you are talking to vulnerable people. You know, there is all the power relations that are involved in an interview, which is I mean, an interview in itself is a power structure. I mean, you interview somebody's being interviewed. I mean, this is like a basic principle. It's not the same as the small talk you were talking about, the informal talk, which is absolutely crucial in every fieldwork, not just because it gives you information, but it's because you can connect it's the way you connect to the people, talking about what you were saying. Like now, maybe you are calling somebody who is in a situation in which they cannot, we have to think very seriously about the vulnerability of many of the people that are maybe first, they may not have access, the same access we have to internet, and they have it they don't have it normalized at all, or they don't have access at all, and then they may be just surviving, you know, in the informal economy, or their countries are locked down, but they live on a daily basis. They have to work in the informal economy. They are suffering from hunger. They cannot pay the rent. And then you are going with your project, coming from the US or from Europe, asking questions about something that now is, you know, not their priority. So this is something that I think that you have pointed to, Barbara, which is absolutely crucial, no? To try to understand that first. We cannot, on the one hand, we cannot allow the people who are on the lower scales, you know, of internet access to become invisible, because we cannot access them. But at the same time, we should be, and that's the reflexivity part comes in, we should be sensible enough to learn if this can be done at this point or not. And I think this is also something to take into consideration, no? And this is something I mentioned very briefly, but it's a huge issue which has to do with digital citizenship, no? Which is basically how who has access to internet, in which conditions, and etc. No? And then the human voice and telephone. Yes, obviously we have to it has to do also with the character of the researcher. No? Some people may adjust better to some circumstances. Some people don't. But this is one skill that you have, and goes also with your character. And then it's a skill you learn how to connect with other people. And but these things have to be trained during graduate school, and then they have to be adjusted in the field. But thanks for your input, because I think that it touches upon this makes me think a lot, because here in Spain, I mean, the situation is terrible in terms of coronavirus, but basically most of us, but we don't live in the Central Republic of Africa. I mean, we are not in a place where we live in a very, very precarious situation. No, all of us have internet access. We don't have. We can be online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't have these problems. But even in Spain, I have some friends who work in the informal economy. They don't have Wi-Fi at home, and they are totally disconnected, no? Totally disconnected. And the only thing that matters to them is like, what do I eat today? No? And this is Spain. So just imagine in poorer countries where the vulnerability is way higher. No? So this is something we have also to take into consideration, that our project doesn't come always first, but we may have to readjust. And that's the reason I said at the beginning that we may hibernate the project if necessary. And this would be, I mean, ethically, this would be one important consideration. Do you have more questions in the chat, Alex, or?
Let's see. Seems, I think the first question was on access. I think you have addressed it. Well, there's a question there on how to solicit access to Facebook groups that host individuals who are part of the community of focus. So I'm not really sure, but yeah, that's the question. I'm reading the question on the Q&A. Are there any other questions or comments, or would be also nice to hear of others who want to share their experience during this time?
Hey, hi. I'm Naisari, and I'm an undergraduate student. I'm working with a laboratory, psychological laboratory in University of Minnesota. So the thing is that I'm from India, so I'm back in India right now actually, and I'm gonna be in India for a while. And so a lot of the research that I'm doing with the PhD guide is virtual, and we haven't gotten to the data collection part of the research yet. But I don't even know how the RIB rules work. So I'm not really experienced in these things, and that's why I attended this workshop, to try to figure out how the other researchers are doing with the virtual data collection or and stuff like that. So I don't know. I just wanted to say that I'm really grateful that this workshop happened.
And what kind of work are you doing, Naishagari?
So our research topic is not yet fixed. We are still trying to sort of finalize it. I'm right now doing the literature review, but it's broadly based on the religious divide. So now, like, since I'm in India, my PhD guide, she wants to, her main topic is, she's been doing research on Muslim population and Khoja population. and she wants to do some research in the Hindu-Muslim divide in India. But she did not know, like she did not have any access to the communities. But now that like I am in India, I have access to certain communities and I can collect data. So we are trying to work something out related to that.
But how are you doing? Are you now confined also in India, or like you have like a tough confinement policy?
Yes, and in the whole country, yes, the whole country is under a lockdown. So I'm inside my house. I cannot leave my house. But I've been living here for 20 years. So in a way, I can still access the community online.
Okay.
I haven't figured out the exact ways of doing that. So
Yes.
I'm just gonna take it as it comes. But I'm sure I can reach to some people.
But you don't belong to that community, no? To that that you are going to study.
So I identify as a Hindu. So when I have to collect the data from Hindu population, I will be able to do that. I don't like, so we've talked about me collecting data from Hindu population. We have not talked about how we are going to collect data from the Muslim population, because as you said, I do not belong to the community, so it would be rather difficult for me to collect data from that community.
I think that your case shows another important thing, that is that depending on the experience, the previous experience, research experience you have, you may have to scale down your project or just rescale it, because now the new situation will need special skills that that you only have when, for example, you have and some other people already just talked about it, when you have like previous connections and previous rapport. Connected with people, no? So it's a matter of scaling the first assessing the situation of lockdown, and then in your case you are talking about a religious difference, and which may make it very difficult to connect to them even online. So you may have to leave this part out of the project, and maybe you know, I think that as I said at the beginning, that coronavirus is already part of all our research projects. It is so on one way or another. So we can just push it to the side and think this is just a blip in the wave, and that it will come back to normal. Or we can integrate it in the research. For example, reactions of the Hindu community I want to study to the coronavirus pandemic, and then that could allow you to do like very fresh and interesting fieldwork. I mean, if you are in time to refashion your project in connection with coronavirus, this is another option you have in terms of reframing it, rescaling it, and whatnot. And then in the future, you may do something more ambitious, so to speak, no? So
that's actually very true. I'm actually planning on starting another research project that is about how the coronavirus pandemic is influencing. Impacting rather Indian international students. So because as an Indian international student, I know how difficult the decisions are, whether you want to move back to India, whether you want to stay in the US, and even after, like if you come back to India, then there are classes and assignments in a whole different time zone and everything. So it has to be stressful, and I know that it is. Personally, for me, it has been. So I am trying to conduct a research on that as well, as you mentioned.
Super. The coronavirus pushes every community to the limit. It's like a major issue, no? Like so that means that there are ways, there are things you can detect in a certain community you want to study that it could be more difficult to track, maybe in a normal, so to speak, normal situation, no? As opposed to exceptional situation. So this is something that has also to be built into the project. We are doing research in exceptional times. And we have to build this exceptionality into the project one way or another. And it depends on the type of project you have.
Yeah, definitely.
Other questions or comments, or George, our moderator, wants to add something, or there was a, well, Miriam made, there were some very good comments also in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to see them, Miriam had some insight on how to establish rapport and how to build trust, and just small talk before the meetings through Zoom or through other media. What I consider very important, Paco, that you mentioned, that we were already before this digital citizens. However, and this came also out clearly from in your talk and in the responses, that we're digital citizens to different degrees, and we have with different capacities and skills and access. So that seems to be a crucial aspect, in this transition towards remote fieldwork. Mary has a question.
You mentioned this idea of hibernating projects, and I'm assuming there are other graduate students on the call too, but that's something many graduate students are worried about, in the sense that we can't necessarily hibernate a project without institutional support or funding, or our departments and universities thinking about both extending our funding and our timelines. And I wonder if you and other faculty can also talk about how you're advising students, graduate students, during this time. I know other students are also thinking about either pausing the program entirely or dropping out for now. Or, so I think there are also I think there are like a range of concerns in which hibernating isn't possible.
Yeah, it's I mean, it doesn't, obviously, in your case, it doesn't work. You have to continue one way or another, particularly if you have funding already secured, or you have gone through the motions, and then you have to think also about your own careers, and you cannot just stay idle for half a year or 1 year. That's impossible. I mean, when I said hibernating, I was thinking more, not the whole project, but parts of the project, like fast forward some parts of the project that can be done and hibernate others, if this is possible at all. I mean, this is obviously a very complicated situation, and then obviously you have pressure coming from all sides. You have your own career, you have your program, you have the deadline, you have the funding you have to respond to and whatnot. So that's the reason I was saying that let's be imaginative in each case to try to find out a solution for each particular case, because the casuistic is immense, and there is no way we can cover all the cases and all the situations. Total hibernation of the project is possible when you can do it. When you, for example, I could hibernate my project because I am a tenured professor, and I could say, okay, during 6-7 months I don't do anything, even when I have this online part of my research which keeps me quite busy, but I could do this because I can do it because it's like, because of the stage in my career I am at. But in your case, this is not possible. But maybe you can think the whole of your project and try to see how you can turn it around in terms of the timeline that you have designed for your project, and see how much you can move it and hibernate parts of it that can be done later. I know this is just like blowing the wind. No, it's like but that was basically my point, was that there are the project always has many different aspects. You have to do the research design, you have to do the actual fieldwork, you have to do the writing, you have to do the reading, you have to prepare interviews. I mean, to prepare an interview, you have to prepare papers to deliver, you have to prepare papers to publish and whatnot. And sometimes you can move the things around depending on how far are you into your project. No? If you are starting, or you starting, or you were in the field and you had to come back, you have to respond to your funding agency. This is something you have to discuss with your advisor. But I would think is that all the faculty should be well aware of the problems, because we are also having the same problems, and we should be very open to any kind of solution that you may come up with. You know? I wouldn't understand inflexibility, no, in these cases. No? So I don't know if you. No, we can talk later more concretely about your situation. No, to see if we can imagine something that then it's feasible for your advisor, because I'm not, I have no possibility of giving with your advisor or your program, no, your research program. But I think it's maybe the most serious concern, the one you have raised, Mirai.
Thank you so much for responding.
No, of course. I hope I could be of more help.
Right. Well, it seems that that there are no more questions or no comments in the chat. So something we have also learned in these weeks of Zooming is that how much more intensive this is, how we might actually reduce our meetings and shorten them to fewer snippets of input and time. So I would like to close it here, thanking everyone for attending, for your insight and your questions, and of course thanking Francisco Ferrándiz, Paco, for connecting with us from the Madrid lockdown. Today, a month of total lockdown, right? Yeah. So we really appreciate that we could have you here with us today at the workshop, and thank you so much.
Thanks to you, and I always feel at home in the University of Minnesota, so it's I feel very comfortable, and if